The Carter estate stretched across acres of carefully sculpted land, fountains rising like silver flames and walls gleaming with polished stone. Yet inside those walls, Daniel Carter felt like a prisoner. Heir to the largest companies in the nation, he was expected to inherit not just an empire, but a life planned down to the hour. "You're wasting your youth, Daniel," his father thundered one evening. "You have a seat on the board waiting. You'll learn to lead as I did." Daniel looked out the window at the city's skyline blurred by twilight. "I want to know life beyond this cage. I want to serve my country." His father slammed a fist against the table. "Serve? You were born to command, not to march in dust with common men." But Daniel had already made up his mind. Within weeks, the polished suits were replaced with camouflage. The chauffeur-driven cars were left behind for army trucks that rattled over rough terrain. For 2 years, he learned to crawl through mud, to fire a rifle, to endure blistering heat and nights cold enough to cut through bone. The world no longer treated him as an heir, but as a man among men. And it was in this stripped-down life that Daniel found a strange peace. One evening, after long drills, his comrades urged him to join them at a bar in the city. The place smelled of roasted meat and cheap beer, its walls lined with peeling posters. Music throbbed in the background, and laughter swirled like smoke. That was where he saw her. Clara. She was seated at the counter, stirring a drink absent-mindedly. Her smile came slowly, almost shyly, when she caught him staring. Something about her, unpolished, real, unaffected by wealth or reputation, drew him. "First time here?" she asked when he finally approached. "Yes," Daniel said. His voice was softer than he intended. "I don't usually drink, but tonight I had no choice." She laughed, a sound as bright as glass chimes. "Then you're in the wrong place. This bar survives on bad choices." That night they talked, about music, about books, about small dreams that cost nothing. Daniel told her nothing about who he truly was, and as the night stretched on, he realized he didn't want to. For once, he wanted to be loved without the weight of his name. The weeks after that first meeting unfurled like a secret he wanted to keep forever. Daniel found himself returning to the bar whenever his schedule allowed. Sometimes Clara was there, waiting with that half-smile. Sometimes she wasn't, and he would sit nursing a drink until she appeared. What surprised him most was how natural it felt to be around her. He was used to people adjusting themselves in his presence, sitting straighter, choosing their words carefully, angling for approval. But Clara didn't know the heir, the boardroom successor, the name Carter that made doors open. She only knew Daniel, the quiet soldier with calloused hands and a tired face. One evening, as they walked together through the dimly lit streets after leaving the bar, Clara tugged at his sleeve. "You never talk much about yourself," she said. Daniel hesitated, his boots scuffing the pavement. "There isn't much to say. I'm just a man serving his country, that's all." "Just a man," she repeated with a teasing lilt. "You make it sound like you're hiding a crown somewhere." He smiled faintly, hiding the sting of truth. "Would you believe me if I said I was?" Clara's eyes softened, and she slipped her hand into his. "I don't care who you are, Daniel. I care that you walk me home, that you listen when I complain about my shift, that you laugh at my terrible jokes. That's enough." Her words filled him with warmth, a dangerous kind of warmth. Because deep down, Daniel wondered if this was what he had always searched for, love untainted by wealth, affection untouched by ambition. Their relationship grew in stolen hours. He would take her to roadside stalls for suya, the spice making them both laugh through tears. They'd sit on broken benches in public parks, talking about dreams. Clara spoke of wanting stability, a life where she no longer worried about rent or unpaid bills. Daniel spoke less, always steering the conversation back to her. Sometimes, lying awake in his barracks, he imagined the day his service would end. He pictured himself standing before her, finally able to tell her everything, about the Carter Group, the empire waiting for him, the truth she never guessed. He thought she would be proud, that her eyes would widen not with fear but with joy. He was certain of it. Daniel had no idea that truth, when it came, would tear them apart instead of binding them closer. The day Daniel's service ended was bright, the kind of day that begged for celebration. Soldiers laughed and slapped one another on the back as they packed their duffel bags, eager to return to civilian life. Daniel felt lighter than he had in years, not because of freedom, but because he was about to share his truth with Clara. He rehearsed it in his mind as he drove back to the city, how he would take her hand, how he would confess that he wasn't just Daniel, the soldier. He was Daniel Carter, heir to the empire that fed the country's economy. He imagined her surprise giving way to tears of joy. He called her. "Clara, I'm back. Can we meet tonight?" There was hesitation on the other end. "Daniel, maybe tomorrow. Tonight isn't good." His smile faltered. "Clara, it's been 2 years. Please, just tonight." Silence, then a sigh. "Fine, come over." Daniel arrived with flowers, his heart thudding in his chest. But Clara's expression when she opened the door wasn't the one he dreamed of. Her eyes darted, restless, and her lips curved into something closer to pity than joy. Inside, she didn't let him settle before she spoke. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." His hand tightened on the bouquet. "What is it?" "I can't keep seeing you. There's someone else." The words crashed over him. Someone else. Clara avoided his gaze. "He's different. He's powerful, successful. He's the CEO of Carter Group. He's been supporting me, helping me financially. He offers me security, Daniel, a future." For a moment, Daniel thought he misheard. "The CEO of Carter Group," he repeated, his throat dry. "Yes," she nodded firmly, as though trying to convince herself. "I can't keep struggling when there's a chance for freedom. You don't understand what it's like to always worry about tomorrow." Daniel stared at her, every word like a blade carving into him. She didn't know. She couldn't know. All this time, every tuition fee, every rent bill, every quiet lifeline that arrived in her account had come from him, her Daniel, not some distant figure she imagined. But she looked at him, now, with eyes already turned elsewhere. "So that's it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're leaving me for him." Clara flinched but didn't waver. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I need more than love to survive." He placed the flowers gently on her table, though his hands trembled. "Then I hope you find what you're looking for," he said. And without another word, he walked out, the weight of betrayal pressing against his chest until he thought he might collapse. That night, Daniel understood for the first time that love, when built on illusions, could break sharper than any battlefield wound. Daniel had not planned to see Clara again after that night. Yet, a stubborn corner of his heart still clung to her laughter, to the belief that if she saw him face to face, away from illusions, she might choose differently. So he booked a dinner, a private table at an upscale restaurant, candles flickering, a bottle of wine waiting. He told himself it wasn't about begging, it was about closure. But Clara never came. The minutes stretched into an hour, the empty chair across from him mocking his hope. The waiter returned more than once, politely asking if he wished to order, his pity barely hidden. Daniel was about to rise when a woman appeared, sliding into the vacant seat as though drawn by accident. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loosely gathered, but her face carried the weight of storms. She set her bag on the table and rubbed her temples. "Miss," the waiter began, frowning, "this seat is reserved." Daniel lifted a hand. "Let her stay." The woman blinked, startled, then offered a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I just needed somewhere quiet." Daniel studied her. She looked young, but her eyes bore exhaustion that no youth should carry. Something about the way her shoulders slumped told him she was holding more than she could bear. "It's all right," he said softly. "You look like you need the chair more than I do." For a while they sat in silence. She stirred her water, lost in thought. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "My family company is collapsing," she confessed, almost to herself. "Everything my father built is slipping away. Debts, lawsuits, investors pulling out. I don't even know why I came here tonight. Maybe I thought food would drown the panic." Her candor surprised him. He had expected guarded conversation, not raw truth. He leaned forward slightly. "What company?" She hesitated, then said, Williams and Co., my father's firm. You've probably read about the bankruptcy rumors. Everyone else has. Williams and Co. Daniel knew the name. They had been in decline for years, one of many companies his board had marked for acquisition. But here sat the heiress, looking not like a rival, but like a child caught in a storm too fierce for her hands. I don't usually tell strangers things like this, she murmured, but maybe you feel less like a stranger tonight. Daniel's chest tightened. He should have revealed who he was then, should have admitted the truth, but something stopped him. Instead, he offered the only thing he could in that moment. Sometimes, when storms come, it isn't about stopping the rain. It's about finding the right shelter. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, weary but real. And you think you're shelter? Maybe not, but I can listen, and sometimes that's enough. For the first time that evening, Daniel felt his own ache ease. Clara's absence no longer haunted the empty chair. Someone else had taken the place, and with her, a new story had begun. Nancy had not meant to return to that restaurant after their accidental meeting, yet she did. Something about the stranger, Daniel, lingered in her mind. He hadn't tried to impress her or pity her. He had simply listened, steady and quiet. The second time, she found him waiting with 2 cups of coffee already ordered. "You came back," he said, his tone calm, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of relief. "I wasn't sure I would." She sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "But I thought maybe you'd let me talk again." "Of course," he replied. Their meetings grew into a rhythm. Sometimes at cafes, sometimes in parks, sometimes in quiet corners of the city. Nancy poured out her frustrations, creditors at her door, employees threatening to resign, newspapers tearing her family name apart. Daniel listened. Then carefully he began to guide. "You're bleeding money in too many places," he told her one evening as they sat in a riverside cafe. He scribbled on a napkin, his handwriting neat and deliberate. "Cut the luxury expenses, renegotiate leases, focus on the one division that still turns profit." Nancy frowned, biting her lip. "You sound like a consultant." "Let's say I've had exposure to business," he replied vaguely. She gave him a long look. "And what do you gain from tutoring me?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "Nothing, except maybe the satisfaction of seeing you stand instead of fall." That silenced her. For years she had been surrounded by men who only offered advice with strings attached. Yet here was someone who asked nothing in return. One evening, after he walked her to her car, Nancy stopped and turned to him. Her eyes glistened in the glow of the streetlight. "Why are you helping me, Daniel? You barely know me." He looked at her, the truth heavy on his tongue. "Because I know what it is to be broken and still pretend to be whole. Because I lost something I thought was love, and maybe helping you is the only way to mend myself." But all he said was, "Because I can." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Then maybe I owe you more than I can repay." Daniel shook his head. "Just survive, Nancy. That will be enough." And in that fragile exchange, something began to take root between them. Not the reckless fire of infatuation, but the slow, steady warmth of trust. Daniel had grown used to the rhythm of his new life. Days filled with quiet strategy meetings with Nancy, evenings where they walked along the riverfront, conversations flowing more easily than either of them expected. The pain Clara left behind still lingered, but it no longer owned him. With Nancy, he felt something gentler, steadier. But ghosts have a way of returning when least welcome. Clara saw him first. She was leaving a boutique one afternoon when she spotted him across the street. At first, she thought her eyes betrayed her. Daniel, the man she had discarded, was walking with a woman at his side, her hand brushing his as though it belonged there. Clara's steps faltered. She ducked behind a lamppost, her heart pounding. Who was she? That face, yes, she had seen it in the newspapers. Nancy Williams, heiress of Williams and Co., the company drowning in bankruptcy. Jealousy burned sharp and fast, so Daniel moved on to her. That girl has nothing left. What could he possibly want with her? But the more Clara thought about it, the more unease crept into her chest. Daniel had always been different, reserved. He carried himself with a quiet confidence she hadn't understood at the time. She began to wonder if there was more to him than she had believed. Her suspicion turned to obsession. Within days, Clara began asking questions. She called in favors, probed through acquaintances, even flirted with a junior accountant at Carter Group. And then the truth landed in her lap like a cruel joke. Daniel Carter. Not just Daniel the soldier. Not just Daniel, the man who had sat in her small apartment listening to her dreams. He was Daniel Carter, heir to the very empire she had chased. The CEO of Carter Group, the same invisible benefactor who had funded her rent, her schooling, her comfort. Clara dropped the papers on the floor of her bedroom, her hands trembling. It was him. It had been him all along. She laughed bitterly. I left him for himself. But laughter turned quickly into rage. She had traded away the crown by her own foolishness. And now another woman, a bankrupt heiress with nothing, was standing where she should have been. That night, Clara stood before her mirror, her reflection cold and unfamiliar. If she thinks she can take what should be mine, she's mistaken, she whispered. The ghost had returned, not seeking love but vengeance. Clara had always been ambitious, but ambition twisted with jealousy became something darker. Once she knew Daniel's secret, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nancy sitting where she should have been, Nancy smiling at him, Nancy holding his hand, Nancy receiving the life she had so carelessly thrown away. This was supposed to be mine, she muttered to herself, packing her apartment. The city lights glimmered through the window, sharp and mocking. The first step was whispers. Clara had connections in social circles where gossip traveled faster than news. At cocktail parties, she leaned close to investors and murmured that Nancy was clinging to Daniel out of desperation, that she was using pity to keep him interested. She has nothing left, Clara said sweetly, swirling her glass. And Daniel, he's always been too soft-hearted. You know how men like him are, drawn to damsels in distress. The rumors spread. Next, Clara used her charm to reach out to a junior board member of Carter Group. Over dinner, she hinted that Nancy's company, Williams & Co., was entangled in shady practices. With a little effort, she planted forged documents, fake ledgers tucked among Nancy's files that suggested misused funds. If these surface, Clara whispered to herself as she sealed the envelope, Daniel will see what kind of woman she really is. But for all her cunning, Clara underestimated Daniel. He noticed the timing of the rumors, the sudden appearance of evidence that didn't align with the numbers he had already studied. And beneath it all, he recognized the pattern. Clara had always been restless when she didn't get her way, always reaching for shortcuts. One evening, as he walked Nancy to her car, Daniel's mind churned with anger he hadn't felt in years. He could sense Clara's hand in the shadows, tugging at strings, determined to tear down the fragile trust he was building. Nancy, unaware of the storm, leaned against the car and sighed. Sometimes I wonder why you even bother with me, Daniel. Every day feels like fighting a battle I'm destined to lose. Daniel reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. His voice was steady, though inside, he seethed at Clara's cruelty. Because you're stronger than you think, and because I don't believe in letting storms win. Nancy smiled faintly, unaware that he was silently promising her something else, that he would not let Clara's schemes break her. Not this time. Nancy had sensed something from the beginning. Daniel carried himself with a composure that didn't fit the life he described. His advice was too precise, his knowledge too vast, his confidence too unshakable. He didn't talk like a man who had merely seen the world of business. He talked like someone who had lived it. Still, she hadn't pressed him, until the night everything came to a head. They had been poring over a pile of documents at her office. Nancy leaned back in her chair, exhaustion settling in her bones. She rubbed her forehead and let out a humorless laugh. I can't keep doing this, she whispered. The debts, the creditors, the employees who look at me like I'm a sinking ship. And here you are, always ready with answers. Who are you really, Daniel? He stilled. Don't brush me off, she said, her voice sharper now. You aren't just some ordinary man who happened to take an interest in me. No consultant gives this much time without something in it for him. So tell me, who are you?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood, his jaw set. "Come with me." Nancy frowned but followed, confusion battling with suspicion. They drove in silence, the city lights flashing past like streaks of gold. He led her into the Carter Group headquarters, a tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. The guards bowed as they entered, the receptionist greeting him with a polished, "Good evening, Mr. Carter." Nancy's steps faltered. "Mr. Carter." Daniel pressed the elevator button without answering. They rose to the top floor, the hum of machinery filling the silence. When the doors opened, he led her into a vast office lined with bookshelves and maps, a desk carved from oak, windows overlooking the entire city. "This," he said quietly, turning to her, "is who I am." Nancy's breath caught. Her eyes widened as the pieces fell into place, the guarded words, the business knowledge, the quiet authority. You're Daniel Carter, the CEO of Carter Group." He nodded once. Anger surged in her chest, hot and sharp. "You lied to me." "I withheld," he said firmly, "because I needed to know if you would trust me without all this." He gestured to the room, the empire spread out beneath them. "Too many people look at me and see nothing but money. I wanted you to see me." Her hands trembled at her sides. "Do you know what it feels like to fight for scraps, thinking you've finally found someone who understands, only to realize he's been a king hiding in plain sight? You don't know the humiliation of standing on sinking ground." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading. "I do. I've stood in mud, Nancy. I've marched with men who had nothing. I've been rejected by someone I thought loved me because she wanted a crown I already carried. I didn't want that with you." Tears stung her eyes, though she fought them back. "And what makes you think I'm any different?" "Because you never asked for anything," he said. "You only asked me to listen, and I did. And in those moments I saw you not as an heiress, not as a woman failing to save her company, but as Nancy." Silence filled the office, heavy with truths neither could escape. Finally, Nancy lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I can't deny I believe you." Daniel's chest loosened, just slightly. He had laid bare the secret he guarded, and though her trust was not yet complete, he saw in her eyes the first fragile thread of it forming. Clara's jealousy had curdled into something poisonous. The gossip she spread had not broken Nancy. The forged papers had been dismissed after Daniel himself reviewed them. Still, Clara could not accept defeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel beside Nancy, smiling in a way he never had with her. "He's supposed to be mine," she hissed one night, staring at her reflection. "She's nothing, she has nothing. How can she win when I gave him up by mistake?" Her desperation finally pushed her to recklessness. It was late when Nancy left her office, exhaustion weighing down her steps. The parking lot was nearly empty, shadows stretching long under the flickering lamps. As she unlocked her car, a voice cut through the silence. "So this is what he chose instead of me." Nancy turned sharply. Clara stepped out from behind a row of cars, her heels clicking against the pavement, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You're Clara," Nancy said cautiously. She had heard the name from whispers, Daniel's ex. "And you're the woman who thinks she deserves him." Clara's smile was sharp and brittle. "Do you know what you are? A replacement. You're a charity project. He'll get bored, and when he does, he'll remember who he really belongs with." Nancy's hand tightened on her car keys. "If that's what you came here to say, you've wasted your time." Clara stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Leave him. Walk away now, and maybe I'll let you keep what little dignity you have left. Stay, and you'll regret it." Nancy's heart pounded, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "Daniel isn't yours to claim. He chose me, and no amount of threats will change that." Clara's eyes flashed. She lunged forward, gripping Nancy's wrist. But before the struggle could escalate, floodlights snapped on. 2 security guards rushed from the building, alerted by the cameras. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" One of them barked, pulling Clara back. Nancy shook her head, her voice trembling. "No problem, just someone who lost her way." Clara thrashed against the guard's grip, her composure unraveling. "You'll regret this, Nancy. He's mine, do you hear me? Mine." Daniel arrived moments later, alerted by a call from security. He took in the scene, the guards, Nancy pale but standing firm, Clara struggling in rage, and his face hardened. "Enough," he said coldly. His voice carried no warmth, no trace of the man Clara once knew. "You had me, Clara, not my money, not my empire, me, and you threw it away. Don't ever come near Nancy again." Clara froze, her fury cracking into despair. But his eyes held no softness, no pity. For the first time, she realized she had truly lost. As the guards escorted her away, Daniel turned to Nancy. His hand brushed hers, steadying her trembling fingers. "You're safe now," he murmured. Nancy looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't feel safe, but I feel stronger." And in that moment, Daniel knew Clara's hold on his past had finally broken. The weeks after Clara's breakdown carried a silence Daniel had not known in years. The newspapers, which once whispered about his hidden heirship and his scandalous love life, now turned their attention elsewhere. Clara vanished into the margins, her name fading from conversations, leaving Daniel and Nancy space to breathe. Nancy stood on the balcony of her apartment one evening, gazing at the city lights. For months, her life had been a storm of creditors, shame, and whispers of ruin. Now the tide was shifting. Daniel's guidance had saved her company from collapse, but it was his presence that had saved her from despair. When the door behind her opened, she didn't need to turn. She knew it was him. "You're quiet tonight," Daniel said, stepping beside her. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up, the evening breeze tugging at his shirt. Nancy gave a faint smile. "Quiet feels new to me. I think I like it." Daniel studied her profile, the way the city's glow traced her features. For so long, he had hidden behind masks, soldier, heir, CEO, but with Nancy there was no disguise. "I never thanked you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For seeing me that day in the restaurant. I was drowning, Daniel, and you didn't throw me a rope. You jumped in." His hand found hers, warm and certain. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed. After Clara, after the lies, I didn't think I could trust love again. But then you sat at my table, uninvited, and changed everything." Her chest tightened, emotion rising. "So, what happens now, for us?" Daniel drew a slow breath. "I don't want to hide anymore. Not who I am, not what I feel." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her heart stuttered. "Daniel." He opened it, revealing a simple ring. No ostentation, no flashing diamonds, only a band with quiet brilliance. "I don't need time to know, Nancy. I've seen you at your weakest and your strongest, and I want to walk the rest of this road with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and the city seemed to pulse brighter, as if it too had been waiting for this moment. Daniel drew her into his arms, and the kiss they shared carried both the ache of battles past and the promise of peace ahead. The story of Daniel, the hidden heir, and Nancy, the heiress who nearly lost everything, was no longer about disguises or betrayals. It was about two souls who had been broken in different ways, but had found in each other the strength to heal. And for Daniel, this was the ending he never imagined, but the one he had always needed.